You know, we're living in this age of COVID-19, which of course is a pandemic that's spread around the world. And one of the usual recommendations to help prevent being infected with the virus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID-19, is to maintain as much natural immunity as possible. Now, I want to quickly add that even if you have maximal, let's say you're in good health and have maximal immunity, it's no guarantee that you won't be infected with COVID-19 if you're directly exposed to it, or if you're exposed to it for extended periods. If you hang around, let's say in a closed in a room with a bunch of people that are infected and they're breathing or coughing and sneezing in the face, you could have the greatest immune system in the world, and it's not going to prevent you from being infected, especially if you're not vaccinated. The current recommendations are to have the two best type of vaccines are Moderna and Pfizer. Moderna is slightly more potent than the Pfizer vaccine. It's recommended to have the two initial vaccines of either one, and also to have a booster, especially if you're older than 65. And as I'm speaking right now, they're considering, Pfizer has suggested a second booster for people that are immunocompromised, meaning that your immune system is already, because of disease or possibly some drugs you're using, or let's say you've had a organ transplant, like a kidney transplant, you have to take immunosuppressive drugs. They're recommending that these people take a second booster. There's a lot of crap online, a lot of conspiracy theories about how dangerous the vaccines are. I'm not going to get into that, but I've done a ton of research on the vaccines. I've never seen any convincing evidence that they cause problems. The biggest problem I've seen is in men between the ages of 18 and 25. A very tiny percentage of men in that age category get a short-term myocarditis, which is a inflammation of the heart. And contrary to the garbage you read online, this does not mean permanent heart damage. It's minor. It's a slight inflammation. It lasts only a short time, and it's easily treated. Not a single one of these young men that have acquired myocarditis after having a COVID-19 vaccine. And as I said, it's tiny. It's something like 4 out of 300,000. I can't remember exactly. I don't know the exact statistics, but it's a tiny number. None of them have gone on to have serious heart disease, and none of them have died. All these stories you hear about people dying right after getting the vaccine is completely false. Again, as of now, I believe there's only 6 documented cases of people that have died after having the COVID vaccine. They were all women who took the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and they had a very rare, they didn't know they had it. They had some sort of severe allergic reaction to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which, by the way, is different than the Moderna and the Pfizer. Moderna and Pfizer are based on mRNA. The Johnson & Johnson is not. So those are the only documented deaths. And I know you've been hearing all these stories about my uncle took the vaccine, and a week later he died of a heart attack, blah, blah, blah. All of these things are, believe it or not, coincidental. The vaccine, there's nothing in the vaccine that can cause a heart attack. It's nonsense. So I know there's going to probably be a lot of negative comments under this video of anti-vaxxers who think I'm full of crap, but all of this is documented. It's proven by science. It's in the science journals. Anybody with a brain can read this and realize what the truth is. But that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is I want to focus on natural immunity, since a lot of people, I've gotten into kind of debates with people online, because a typical statement is, I'm not going to get the vaccines because I'm healthy and I depend on my natural immunity to protect me. As I said, the natural immunity may not be enough, but all things being equal, the better your immune system is, the greater the protection you do have. And more importantly, if you are infected with the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID-19, if you have a really great immune system, your chances of progressing to the more serious cases of the disease, such as having to be put on a respirator, where you only have 10% chance of survival, decreases to almost nothing. In other words, the people that wind up with the most deadly forms of COVID-19, in almost every case, they have naturally depressed immunity. So you want to do everything you can to increase your immune response. And you can do that through good nutrition. I wrote an article in my Applied Metabolics newsletter. It's actually one of the biggest articles I wrote for the newsletter. It was on every nutritional measure and natural measure that you can take to boost your immunity to protect you against COVID-19. I was very, very in-depth. I went into detail on every possible nutrient, and not only that, but other things like mushrooms, all natural ways of helping to protect you against COVID-19. And again, if you do get the COVID-19, the case will be mild, because your natural immunity will prevent the disease from progressing to a deadlier form. Now, in this video, I want to talk about something that's often overlooked in relation to immunity, and that of course, but that has to do with exercise. Exercise can be of great benefit to your immune response, or it can be of very bad, have a very bad effect on the immune system, depending on how much exercise you do. In other words, if you do what the studies show, if you do moderate intensity exercise for 60 minutes or less, it actually boosts the immune system. It boosts what they call cellular immune response, such as T cells, killer T cells that actively attack viruses and bacteria and protect you. But it's kind of like a U-shaped curve. In other words, if you exercise too long or too hard, you decrease your immune response. Now, why is that? Because when you go over the line with excessive exercise, you stimulate stress hormones. For example, cortisol from the adrenal gland. Cortisol is a steroid hormone. When I say steroid hormone, it means produce some cholesterol. Doesn't mean cortisol is like anabolic steroids or testosterone. People hear the word steroid hormone, they think it's like anabolic. No, if anything, cortisol tends to be a catabolic steroid. It tends to break down muscle. But in relation to immunity, cortisol unfortunately depresses immune response. And the longer you train, and if you train, let's say hours of training, over doing too many sets, too many reps, if you do aerobics, 2-3 hours or more, what you're doing is you're stimulating a cortisol response. Cortisol goes up after about 60 minutes of exercise. It slowly starts to rise. And as it rises, it depresses your immune response, knocks out all the cellular immunity that I'm talking about, T cells and that stuff. In fact, they did studies years ago of marathon runners, and they found that after, marathon is 26 miles or 385 yards. It's basically gross overtraining, but it's a race. What can you say? Long distance running. But they measured the immune response of a lot of these marathon runners, and they basically were, at the end of the race, they had the immunity of a typical AIDS patient. In other words, their immune system was depressed to nothing. What this means in a practical sense, if any of these runners left the race, let's say went to celebrate somewhere and were in a room where somebody had a cold or a flu, and they were exposed to that person, they would get it. No doubt about it. They would get it. Then later on, a couple of other scientists figured out that one of the reasons that it's not just the excess cortisol that causes the depressed immunity with excessive exercise, but also because the excess exercise depletes glutamine, an amino acid glutamine. Glutamine is a non-essential amino acid, but one of the things it does, it's one of the main fuels of immune cells. T cell, all these cells use glutamine to basically reproduce and maintain a certain healthy balance of immunity, let's say, right? So for what the scientists deduced, or they came up with a hypothesis that if you over-exercise, or if you engage in something like a marathon run, really excessive exercise, if you take glutamine right after the workout, it would actually help to stabilize the immune system by providing fuel for your immune cells. It'll boost immunity and counter the effects of exercise. Unfortunately, subsequent studies show that that doesn't always work. In other words, it's true that glutamine is the fuel for immune cells, but in other words, it doesn't necessarily mean that taking glutamine will completely regenerate your immune response. If you overexercise, you're still going to have a little bit of depressed immunity. Researchers found that performing aerobic exercise at a moderate to vigorous intensity for less than 60 minutes, or an average of, let's say, 30 to 45 minutes, I myself go for 30 minutes of aerobics, increases the recruitment and circulation of the immune system defensive cells like T cells. This is a consistent finding they found over and over again. Another reason why exercise helps increase immunity is because it raises body temperature. Now, you know that when you get sick, you often get a fever, and people consider fever bad. In fact, a fever is one of the first signs of being infected with COVID-19. What a fever does is it kind of stimulates your immune response. And also, having elevated body temperature tends to be lethal, or helps the body to deal with invasion of bacteria and viruses. So what a exercise does, it kind of increases your body. Anyone who works out knows, I mean, you sweat, whether it's cold or not. Exercise increases body temperature. It's kind of like giving yourself a temporary fever, and this can actually negatively affect the way that bacteria and viruses spread disease in your body. So exercise also helps immunity by increasing body temperature, kind of a self-induced fever, which is good. Exercise also helps because exercise can help you get better sleep. Now, I've mentioned this in my Applied Metabolics. I had a recent issue which I devoted the entire issue to sleep, the science of sleep, very in depth. And I talked about how sleep can affect the immune response. In a nutshell, not getting enough sleep horribly depresses the immune system. All these people that walk around and brag about getting 3-4 hours sleep, they're walking around with very, very depressed immunity. Yes, some of them might say they feel, I feel great. I only get 4 hours sleep. There's nothing wrong. I mean, there's a guy, I was just looking at a video the other day. I forget his name. He's a chef. I can't remember his name offhand. A nice guy. I've met the guy. But apparently he mentioned in a video how he worked, what does he do? He every day he gets on only 3 hours sleep. 3 hours sleep. Now, this guy's a big guy, as I said, nice guy, but 3 hours sleep is, I don't know if he realizes he's killing himself. Not only does sleep totally depress testosterone levels, one night of sleep can cause one night of not enough sleep, with enough sleep defined as 7 hours to 8 hours of sleep is ideal for most people. If you get less than that, you depress your testosterone by 15% in just one night. But in regard to the immune system, not getting enough sleep, again, raises stress hormones like cortisol, and it tends to decrease your immune response significantly. If you don't get enough sleep, your odds of getting sick greatly increase. I've noticed in myself, if there are periods when I haven't got enough sleep, and that's the only time I ever get sick. The only time I ever get sick is well, you can say also it's a stress effect because of the increase in stress hormones. But the only time in my life that I've ever gotten sick, other than diseases that have nothing to do with the immune response, is when I have not gotten enough sleep. So sleep is very important, and exercise helps because it helps you to sleep better. The only problem is if you exercise, let's say late at night, and you want to go to sleep like right afterwards. Unfortunately, exercise stimulates certain, let's say, chemicals in the brain, like catecholamines, dopamine, which increase alertness. And the last thing you want when you want to go to sleep is increased alertness. That's the problem with having engaging in exercise too close to sleep. It's too much of a stimulation. So what you want to do is exercise maybe 4 hours before you go to sleep. If you do that, the exercise actually promotes sleep, and also the exercise will help you to stimulate your immune system at the same time. Exercise also decreases the risk of other factors that interfere with immune response, such as type 2 diabetes, elevated lipids like cholesterol. All of these things make it harder for your immune system to ward off infections. So exercise will decrease the risk of various chronic diseases, heart disease, diabetes, and such. And as I said earlier, exercise, another advantage of exercise for the immune system is it decreases stress and other conditions of depression. In fact, I think exercise is actually the greatest thing for people that are under stress or tend to be chronically depressed. Because when you exercise, you stimulate, again, these brain-stimulating chemicals like dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin, which actually work against stress. Most of your antidepressant drugs work by increasing these same neurotransmitters in the brain that exercise increases naturally. So I myself have always depended on exercise as a way of dealing with stress. I've never resorted to negative things like taking drugs or drinking alcohol. Exercise has worked for me since I was 12 years old. Anytime I've had stress in my life, and it's unavoidable, you're always going to encounter stress. In fact, I just had an article, I just did an article in my Applied Metabolics newsletter about how stress really affects health. I'm not going to go into it here, but let's just say that exercise is a tremendous antidote to dealing with any kind of stress in your life. Also, exercise decreases depression. Depression, again, is caused by a lowering of certain neurotransmitters in the brain. The exercise raises that, basically erases depression. Contrast that with antidepressant drugs, which are among the most prescribed drugs in the United States. But the problem is antidepressant drugs take 3 to 6 weeks to kick in. Exercise kicks in 1 day. And here's a little tip for you, for those of you who tend to be chronically depressed. If you take an amino acid called L-tyrosine and you coordinate it with the exercise will decrease depression even faster. Why? Because tyrosine is the precursor for those same feel-good chemicals in the brain that I mentioned earlier, such as norepinephrine and dopamine. And again, when they're elevated in the brain, you just can't get depressed. Now, the relationship between stress and depression and the immune response is both stress and depression decrease immune response. In other words, when you're under stress because of the cortisol and other effects, you're in an immunosuppressive state. And when you're under depression, those again, it's indicative that those brain neurotransmitters are down, and you also are open to less immune response. It decreases your immune response. So also being involved in stress and depressive states also leads to a type of systemic inflammatory status that also favors decreased immunity. When you have inflammation in your body, it tends to blunt immune response, and that's also something to consider. Exercise itself is one of the best ways to reduce inflammation. For example, there's a situation where people who over 40, especially if they don't exercise, levels of what they call systemic inflammation rise with age. It starts about 40, goes up and up. Now, systemic inflammation is a cornerstone of many types of diseases, including cancer, heart disease, diabetes, you name it. But it tends to go up with age because certain cytokines, which are immune proteins, tend to stimulate inflammation. They tend to increase with age. One of them is called interleukin 6, and there's others. But the point is that systemic inflammation not only causes catabolic effects in muscle, breaks down muscle, it leads to a condition in older people called sarcopenia, which means loss of muscle. But more related to what this topic I'm talking about is that inflammation also tends to decrease your immune response. And so exercise, it turns out, has a tremendous anti-inflammatory effect. In fact, Some scientists who study the effects of exercise believe that probably the greatest benefit of exercise is that it controls or lowers systemic inflammation, and it lowers it fast. It lowers it very fast, faster than any possible drug. So that's another reason why exercise aids your immune response, because it lowers systemic inflammation. Then also, another great thing about exercise is that as people get older, probably because of situations like systemic inflammation and others, you get a situation called immunosenescence. That's defined as, let me read it right off a study here. Immunosenescence is defined as immune dysregulation with aging, and it's related to an increased susceptibility to infections, autoimmune diseases, neoplasias, which is cancers, metabolic diseases, osteoporosis or bone thinning, and neurologic disorders. Recent evidence supports that immunity can be remodeled during the aging process as a result of interactions with the environment and lifestyle, and is instrumental in shaping immune status in later life. In other words, I'm going to stop reading for a second. You ever hear the expression, when you hear a very old person die, they often say, let's say a person over 100, you hear like the news reports, they'll say, well, they died of old age. I always kind of get a chuckle when I hear that, because age itself doesn't kill you. It's not a direct cause of death. There's no such thing as dying of old age. Something has to kill you. And what usually happens when they say somebody died of old age is what really happened is they died of immunosenescence. In other words, their immune system was so depressed that they might have gotten, let's say, a flu that a younger person might have easily gotten, been cured of, or, the body would get rid of it itself in a short amount of time. But in an older person, because they lack the immunity to deal with the flu, it winds up killing them. That's what they mean when they say die of old age. So a lot of people, again, the older you get, the lower your immune system reacts to bacteria and viruses. Immune system interactions with pathogens, the host microbiome, nutritional and exercise influences, mental stress, and many other factors are considered as crucial modulators of the immune senescence process. I also should point out that another benefit of exercise with regard to immunity is exercise increases the diversity of the intestinal microbiome. I wrote a huge article about this in a recent issue of my Applied Metabolics newsletter. The intestinal microbiome is the population of bacteria, viruses, and fungi, other organisms that exist in the colon, and they exert a tremendous influence on immune response. 99% of immunity occurs as a result of the interaction between the gut microbiome and your immune system. So exercise, by helping to modulate the diversity of organisms that exist in the gut microbiome, is still another way that exercise helps increase immunity. Early cross-sectional studies compared immune function in highly conditioned and sedentary elderly men and women. One study contrasted immune function in 30 sedentary elderly women and 12 age-matched highly conditioned elderly women who were active in state and national senior game and road race endurance events. The highly conditioned elderly women had significantly higher levels of natural killer cells and T lymphocyte function and reduced illness rates compared with this 30 sedentary elderly women. Another study compared immune function in 17 elderly runners who had trained about 17 years and 19 elderly controls who didn't exercise, and reported significantly higher T lymphocyte function in the elderly runners. Data support that habitual exercise is capable of regulating the immune system and delaying the onset of immunosenescence, and has been associated with the following: enhanced vaccination responses. Let me stop for a second and explain that. You might have heard that a lot of the people that do die from COVID-19 are elderly people, older people. Why are older people at greater risk of having serious effects from COVID-19 because of naturally depressed immunity. And get this is the reason why they tell older people to have booster shots, is because of the naturally depressed immune response in older people. The vaccines don't work as well. They're not as protective in older people. So it's important for them to get those boosters, because that will maximize any response they have of their immunity, whatever's left, to the effects of the COVID-19 virus. And when you exercise, by decreasing immunosenescence, or the aging of the immune system, you enhance all types of vaccination responses, including the flu virus. Studies have shown that at best, the flu vaccine, I said flu virus. The flu vaccine at best, even in somebody with excellent immunity, only provides about 65% protection against acquiring the influenza or the flu. I'm not going to get into the reasons why, but the problem is that it often doesn't work at all. They don't like to tell this to people, but the flu vaccine very often has no effect at all in older people who have immunosenescence or depressed, because all vaccines, including the COVID-19 vaccine, work in conjunction with your own immune system. If your immune system's knocked out or depressed, the vaccine's not going to work as well. Now, exercise also helps because it lowers numbers of exhausted and senescent T cells. Again, this relates to the senescence. As you age, the protective components of the immune system, such as T cells, they just don't work anymore, and you have to get rid of them. They kind of get in the way. That's called senescent cells. Exercise helps to get rid of these exhausted T cells, which increases the effectiveness of the rest of the immune system. Exercise also increases the T cell proliferative capacity, meaning it increases the ability of the body to produce T cells. T cells are the immune cells, again, that are specifically attack invading pathogens like viruses and bacteria. They're your ultimate line of defense against disease. Exercise lowers circulatory levels of inflammatory cytokines. Again, these are the things that cause systemic inflammation with age. As you age, these cytokines, these are basically proteins produced by immune cells. They're very good for helping control infections. Unfortunately, when they get out of balance, when they start to accumulate in greater amounts with age, that causes systemic inflammation. In fact, the term for systemic inflammation is called inflammaging, and it's caused by increased numbers of inflammatory cytokines. Exercise lowers that, protects against inflammaging. And the truth is, inflammatory cytokines, when they're produced when you have COVID, they're the things that cause the worst cases of COVID-19. They're the things that attack the lungs and cause people to have to go on respirators. So exercise lowers inflammatory cytokines. By doing that, again, it'll prevent you, if you are unfortunate enough to acquire a COVID-19 infection, it'll lower your chances of having a burst of inflammatory cytokines that could put you on a respirator and possibly kill you. Exercise also increases neutrophil phagocytic activity. Neutrophils are immune cells that basically envelop bacteria, invading bacterial organisms. They kind of envelop them and destroy them before they can cause sickness. Exercise increases the activity of those cells. Exercise lowers inflammatory response to bacterial challenge. Again, invasion of bacteria causes inflammation. The exercise will block that inflammatory increase caused by invasion of bacteria. Exercise causes greater natural killer cell cytotoxic activity. In other words, increases the ability of natural killer cells to kill viruses and bacteria. And also, exercise does something else. It increases the telomere lengths of leukocytes. Leukocytes are, again, white blood cells, part of the immune system. Their age is determined by telomeres, which are kind of little strings on the end of chromosomes. I don't want to get into that. I discussed that in my Applied Metabolic newsletter. But let's put it this way: in a nutshell, as telomeres shorten, cells tend to get older and older and eventually go senescent, where they just don't replicate anymore. So what this means is that exercise tends to keep your immune system younger for a longer time. So, another question that's often before I end this, I just want to point out that a lot of people wonder about should I work out if I feel sick? Now, I got to tell you, just as my little bit of rant here, nothing annoys me more than when I go to the gym. Let's say I'm doing aerobics in the back of the gym. I'm using, let's say, elliptical. This has actually happened several times. I'm on the elliptical machine, minding my own business. Some idiot, man or woman, I'm not going to be sexist, it could be either one, will get on the machine right next to me, and within minutes, they're sneezing and coughing all over the place. I mean, and they're less than 6 feet away. They're exposing me to their goddamn illness, and that really pisses me off. They don't give a crap. They have no concern for anyone else. Of course, when that happens, at the first sign of a sneeze or a cough, I get off the machine, just common sense, and I go as far away from them as possible. What I don't understand is why these people are even in the gym. If they're sneezing and coughing all over the place, stay home. Stay home. Not only that, when you work out, the immune system requires a certain amount of energy to function properly. When you're sick or have an infection, a lot of your energy, is going towards supplying the immune system with, again, enough fuel to work properly to try and overcome the illness. But when you're working out, you're taking away a lot of that energy that the immune system needs to battle the illness, and you're using it for exercise. So you're also actually depressing your immune response, and you're causing an extended time for the illness. How stupid is that? So a lot of times you see, they say, if you're experiencing any above the neck symptoms like congestion, sneezing, sore throat, and runny nose, or you could have a cold, and they say it's okay to do mild and moderate exercise. I completely disagree with that. I disagree for the reason I said earlier. If you have a cold and you know it, and you're sneezing and coughing in the gym, you're spreading illness, and you're a bastard to do that. You should stay home. Don't get other people sick. I don't care if you can exercise. You shouldn't if you're sick. And again, you're working against yourself, because all you're doing is extending your illness. If you do have more intense symptoms like fever, chills, body aches, nausea, then you could have either a flu or even COVID-19. I mean, if you go to the gym under those conditions, you're completely insane. You're a lunatic. And I'm sure that and I know I've seen this, there are people that do that anyway. They don't care how sick they are. They're something loose upstairs where they feel they have to exercise under any conditions. They're stupid. They should stay home. So the answer to should you exercise if you're sick is no. You don't. You stay home. You don't exercise when you're sick. So that's about it for this video. I don't mean to get too rough there. I just, the reason I got so dramatic there about talking about, the people sneezing, because before I knew better, I didn't want to stop my workout. I didn't want to move to another machine. And every time I did that, I got sick. Every single time. So, I'm a little angry about that. I'm angry at myself for being stupid and staying, in close proximity to these morons. But I'm also mad at these people because they come to the gym knowing they're sick. They don't care about anyone but themselves. Very selfish people. So I'm sorry. I think they deserve it. But anyway, if you want more information on nutrition, exercise science, anti-aging research you can use today, ergogenic aids, hormonal therapy, effective fat loss techniques, supplement science, which supplements work, which ones don't, women's health and fitness. All of these topics are covered in extensive detail in my Applied Metabolics newsletter, www.appliedmetabolics.com. And when you subscribe, I'll send you an invitation to join my private Applied Metabolics Facebook page, where each day I post new information on exercise, nutrition, and general medicine and health. I also have an email portal on my Applied Metabolics webpage, where current subscribers only. I don't accept questions, unsolicited questions from people that aren't subscribers. You can send me short questions about anything you might have read in Applied Metabolics or anything that comes to mind regarding nutrition, exercise, and I'll try to answer your question. Again, only subscribers. However, you're welcome to leave comments under this video about suggestions for future videos. If I feel that the topic that you suggest interests a wide variety of people, I'll be happy to do a video on it. So if you want to have the best friend you'll ever have, go to your local shelter, adopt a dog. And by the way, having an animal that you really feel good about, that you love, actually, I know it sounds like I'm making this up, but it's true. It stimulates immune response. Why? Because what it does is it decreases stress. And like I say, just petting a dog or something like that decreases stress. And when you decrease stress, you improve your immune response. You also stimulate a hormone called oxytocin, which is called the bonding hormone. It's the reason that why women immediately bond to their newborn babies, but it makes you be a more sociable person. When people are in love, they get a rise in oxytocin in the beginning of the romance, which very soon takes a precipitous dip. Like after about 2 weeks, there's no oxytocin response. But that's another video. Take care. Thanks for listening.